is and then we start to talk, okay?
Ok.
Oi, gente, como que vocês estão? Ah, a gente está aqui agora no YouTube, deixa eu conferir se está tudo ok, se vocês estão ouvindo. Não tem problema também que depois essa live vai ficar salva e a gente vai fazer a tradução, como eu falei. Estou um pouco nervosa, né? Estou com a pessoa que influenciou toda a trajetória de estudo e com certeza mudou a minha vida, descobri tantas coisas maravilhosas e sei que isso influencia a vida de muita gente. Então vamos começar a ouvir o Dr. Jason Fung, que é o ícone mundial do jejum. So, hi Jason, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. In Brazil, you have a lot of fans of your work. I have a blog, so I talk everything you write on your blog. So let's talk about intermittent fasting.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Okay. The principal question is how to start to do fast in a world when we have to eat every time and we are addicted to food. So how can we do about it?
Yeah, I think that what's important is to understand that fasting is really just a part of a natural cycle. So there's a time that you're supposed to be eating, and there's a time that you're not supposed to be eating. So if you look at the English word breakfast, it actually is the meal that breaks your fast, which means that the fasting is really, part of what you're supposed to be doing, because you can't break the fast if you're not fasting. So if you look back to things like the 1960s and 70s, people would eat 3 meals a day, and then they wouldn't snack, and then they would fast from sort of dinner to breakfast the next day. And it's somewhere around 12 hours, 13 hours, something like that. But that's something that you do every single day. And the most recent evidence, there was a study where they looked at how long people were eating for now compared to then. And it's closer to about 14 and 3/4 of an hour, which means that if you ate breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning, you wouldn't finish eating until 10:45 p.m., which means essentially the only time that you're not eating is when you're sleeping. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. Because remember, when you eat food, your certain hormones go up, insulin predominantly, and that tells your body to store that food energy. So you store it in the body as glycogen in the liver, or you store it as body fat. When you fast, insulin falls, and now you're supposed to pull some of that food energy back out and use it so that your heart and your liver and your lungs have a source of energy, and that you can function normally. So the money, it's just like a wallet, right? You put some money in and you take some money out sometimes, right? But there's a balance there. So if you're always putting food in your mouth and you're always telling your body to store fat, it's going to store fat. So why is it so hard to understand that you should give your body a chance to sort of digest the food that you've eaten and use the energy that's stored away? Because if you just keep putting it in and never taking it out, well, soon you're just going to gain body weight. And that's exactly what's happened. If you're eating from 8 a.m. till 10:45 p.m., you're never having that period where you can pull out that food energy and just use it so that you don't store body fat. And that's fasting. So fasting is just a part of everyday life, and it's really just the flip side of eating. So feeding and fasting are really just two sides of the same coin, but they have to be in balance. So when that sort of balance goes out of whack and you're always feeding, then you're going to gain weight. If you're always fasting, then you're going to lose weight, and that's what we do. So if you want to lose weight, now you want to increase the amount of fasting so that you force your body to take some of that food energy and burn it, because that's what body fat is. It's really just a store of food energy. There's nothing complicated about it. That's why your body puts it there. It's not there for looks. It's there for you to use if you don't eat anything. So use it. that's the whole point. How are you going to lose body fat if you don't let your body use it naturally? And this is the thing that people don't understand, is that it's an entirely natural process. It's not something that's, made up or some newfangled thing. People have been writing about it for thousands of years. It's in virtually every single religion. So Catholicism, around Lent, in Muslims, they have the holy month of fasting and Ramadan. If you look at Mormonism, if you look at Buddhism, if you look at Hinduism. So in all of these sort of religious traditions, you have fasting. So people have been doing it for thousands of years. So it's not something completely newfangled and unnatural. It's actually completely natural. You're using the body fat for what it was designed for, and it's been used for thousands of years without any problems. And now all of a sudden, we decide in sort of 2000 onwards that we're so smart that we have to keep eating all the time. We have to eat all the time. So it's ridiculous that people think that you have to eat breakfast, that as soon as you get up, then you have to have a snack in the middle of the morning, then lunch, then another snack, then dinner, and then more snacks at bedtime. And we think it's healthy, and then we go, I wonder why we're getting so much obesity. It's like, because you're eating all the time. It's like, it's not that complicated. So let your body use it. That's the whole point. It's okay.
It's okay. So people are afraid to do fasting because almost the dietitians tell us you have to eat every 3 hours for losing weight. So the people are confused about that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that's changed a lot, is the sort of officials, the recommendations from professionals is that now you should eat every 3 hours. But again, where did that advice come from? Because it was never scientifically based. It wasn't like they did a study. And nobody in the history of humanity has ever done this, because there's work to do. Like, nobody used to have muffins all over the place and bowls of candy. Like, that's just not normal. Like, sure, maybe at Halloween you might have some, or maybe at Christmas time you might have some snacks around the place. But nowadays, if you go to a regular office, you have a meeting at 10 o'clock and there's muffins. And then you go to a medical conference, for example, it's crazy. They'll have breakfast at 8 o'clock, and then at 10:30 they bring out some muffins, and then only like an hour and a half later you have a full lunch, and then at 2 o'clock, like an hour and a half after you ate lunch, it's more snacks, banana bread, and all this sort of stuff. It's like, okay, but why? Nobody used to do that. There was no science behind it. Somebody just thought it might be a good idea, and then I think the food companies really encouraged it, so they sponsored all these dietitians and said, oh, you have to eat all the time, you have to eat all the time. But let's go back to the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. People ate 3 times a day, and guess what? They were fine. So why all of a sudden have we changed? Has the human body changed from 1970 to 2018 that all of a sudden requires us to eat 6 times a day instead of 3 times a day? It's like, not that I know of. The human body pretty much has been the same for the last 2,000 years. And that's the whole thing. Nothing has changed in the human body. The only thing that has changed is this advice that we should eat all the time. And it's ridiculous, because when you think about it, you should eat all the time to lose weight. It's like, does that even make any sense? Like, it sounds really stupid, because it is really stupid. If you want to lose weight, you shouldn't be eating more. That's the bottom line. We know that when you eat 6 times a day, you're going to tend to eat more than if you eat 3 times a day. That's just normal, because once you start eating, your appetite is going to increase, because it's like appetizers, right? You eat a little appetizer, you get more hungry. You don't get less hungry. So why do we believe? So, they have these things in restaurants called amuse-bouche, which is like a small appetizer. You have appetizers for your meals. The appetizer is not there to kill your appetite. The appetizer is there to increase your appetite, because they know if you eat a little bit, you're going to, your saliva is going to flow. You're going to be more receptive to eating. So if you keep eating small meals 6 times a day without actually getting full because you're only eating a little bit, that's so hard. You got to eat a little bit, then force yourself to stop because you're not full, because you're only eating a little bit. And then do the same thing 6 times in a day, pretty much. Pretty soon, the only thing you can think about all day is eating, because every time you eat, you don't actually get full. So you go, I'm really looking forward to that next bit because I'm so hungry now. So it's a crazy situation where we have this sort of new advice to eat all the time, which is not working at all. And yet everybody still gives this terrible advice. Like, it's okay to not eat. Like, you got to get away from that and understand that there's no science behind that recommendation, and that it was really based on people who wanted us to eat more so that they could sell us more food to make more money, like the big food companies. Yeah, of course they want to sell us snacks. They're snack food companies. Why would you think they wouldn't want you to? So the whole thing is sort of ridiculous.
Okay. How do you start to think about fast to your patients? How did you started?
So, do you mean how we started in terms of the clinic, or how we started in terms
of as a doctor?
Yeah, so I didn't think about nutrition much until about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay.
But in the meantime, so when I did my medical training in the 1990s, that's when you started to see this huge rise in type 2 diabetes. So the obesity epidemic started probably 10 years prior to that, sometime in the 70s and 80s. And then because they had been there for about 10 years, now you start to see type 2 diabetes, which then translated into more kidney disease, which is why I got involved, because I'm a kidney specialist.
Okay.
So I didn't think about it much until recently, but the reason is that it's a much bigger problem than when I completed medical training like 20 years ago. So I was sort of forced to, because we see it just so much more commonly. And when I started thinking about it, I realized that we went about the problem of kidney disease all wrong. That is, type 2 diabetes was causing kidney disease, so we treat the kidney disease. But that's all wrong, because if type 2 diabetes is causing the kidney disease, you should treat the type 2 diabetes and get rid of it, because if you get rid of that, you won't have kidney disease. So then I started to think about type 2 diabetes, and everybody sort of knows that if you lose weight, the type 2 diabetes will go away. So it's a reversible disease, but it all entirely depends on getting people to lose weight. So that's where I really became interested, because you get rid of the weight problem, you don't have the type 2 diabetes problem, which means you don't have the heart and kidney disease that I was dealing with. But that's a much better solution, is to prevent all this disease, because people want to be healthy. So then I started reading about it, and I started thinking about it, and I realized that this whole calorie-based paradigm of weight loss was completely wrong. Again, the science behind it is entirely incorrect, because the body simply doesn't measure calories. So if calories was the most important thing to lose weight, well, I just drink Diet Coke and eat all these fat-free foods, and replace all the stuff with chemicals that have no calories, and I should lose weight. And the truth is that nobody loses weight really with just drinking Diet Coke. That is, if this was such a great solution just to cut calories by, taking artificial sweeteners and all this sort of stuff, then we wouldn't have an obesity crisis, because we'd just switch and everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine. So clearly the whole calorie notion was entirely not true. And that's what I go into a lot in my book, The Obesity Code. So then I started treating people, and I realized that it's really a hormonal issue. So it's all about the hormones in the body, and insulin was the main one. So if insulin is causing weight gain, then the solution is to lower insulin. So low carbohydrate diets and ketogenic diets is a great way to do that. So that's what I started with. I started using these sort of low carbohydrate diets, and it didn't really work very well, because a lot of the people I dealt with, they're like 60, 70 years old, and they're used to eating what they're eating. So they weren't really willing to change it. They didn't really understand what this whole sort of diet was about anyway. So then I thought, okay, well, I still need to make them lose weight. Otherwise, they're going to get sick, and I'm a doctor. So that's when I started thinking about other strategies. And then I thought about fasting. That's basically just not eating. And I thought, wow, that's crazy, right? It's we should never do something so crazy. And then I thought, that's weird because, all of those things that I just talked about, like people do it. And not only that, but I tell people to do it. So if they go on surgery, that they have to stop eating for 24 hours. If they go for a colonoscopy and medical procedures, they have to stop eating for 24 hours. And I know that nothing really bad happens to them because I tell them almost every single week, you have to go for this operation. Don't eat for this period of time beforehand, and it's fine. So then I started thinking about the fasting. And almost nobody was doing it or talking about it at that time. So this was about 5 years ago. So then I looked at the research. There's a few bodybuilders who are talking about it, but nobody's really talking about it from a medical standpoint and in using it for the treatment of disease, treatment of obesity. So then I read the literature, and there was very little about it. But once I started reading about it, I learned a lot more about what happens to the body during this period when you're not eating. And it turns out that there's nothing really bad that happens. It's a sort of a natural thing. So then I just started using it. So I started the Intensive Dietary Management Program, the idmprogram.com, and we started doing it in people. And because I applied a medical model to it, that is, it's not like I'm treating one person for 1 week. I mean, every day people would come in and I would say, this is what you need to do. Don't eat for 24 hours, 3 times a week. And on those days, do this. And then, every 10 or 15 minutes, I'd see a new patient. So I wasn't seeing like a couple patients a week doing this. It was like, tens of patients per week. And over that period of time, I was using it on hundreds and thousands of patients. And some of the stories were just incredible. I mean, the diabetes would completely reverse. Some people one guy had 35 years of diabetes, and we took him off all his insulin and mostly reversed it within like 4 months. It's ridiculous. And people were losing weight. And the other thing that was striking was that people found it not that difficult. So the first week or two was hard, but then after that, they said, yeah, it's pretty easy. And they started cutting out their snacks, eating 1 meal or 2 meals a day instead of 6. And putting in periods of fasting. And then they could use it when they needed to. That is, if they had a bit of weight to lose because, they had gained some weight during the holidays or something, they could do it more. And then they could do it less when they decided to go on vacation or something. They could not do it. So it's very powerful, very flexible, and people could do it. And that's when I realized that this is something that really needs to be spread, this knowledge, because we believe something almost completely incorrect, yet the correct knowledge has the power to really do so much good for so many people. That is, I don't need to give people medications. They don't need to pay anything. They just need the knowledge to say that it's okay, here, you can do this and you'll lose weight. And you can actually prevent a lot of disease. You can actually reverse a lot of diabetes. You can get a lot of people to lose weight for free. And everybody can do that tomorrow. Like, there's nothing stopping us. That is, we have surgeries for weight loss, for example, but they're expensive and there's a lot of side effects. This is not it. Fasting just means getting the knowledge that you need and applying it. I'm not saying it's fun. It's not fun. I'd rather eat donuts, right? But it's something that will make you healthy. And it is available to people, and it's something that people have always done. And that's where we started the IDM program, which stands for Intensive Dietary Management Program. Now it's an online program, so anybody can just go to the website and join. We have a membership for fasting support, making sure that people get the right knowledge. So, it's like anything. If you try to do stuff by yourself, it's just way harder. So you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going on, and you have nobody to talk to afterwards. So this is what we provide. We provide sort of the information that people need so that they know that they're getting into, that the first couple months are going to be hard. how to deal with constipation, how to deal with headaches, what if you have this, so all these sort of things, and then provide other people who are doing it, so a community that you can say, hey, is anybody else having this problem? And those are the things that are very, very useful for people to support them on their journey for the fasting. And this is grown a lot in the last year. You see more and more people talking about it, and this is fantastic, because if people are getting healthier, that's exactly what we're trying to do. So we're just trying to provide the support and also give them some understanding of the science behind it, so that they don't have to be so scared about it, because most of the time people get scared out of it by a dietitian or a friend who says, oh, you should never do that because this is what's going to happen. And we can say, no, this is actually not what happens. The science says this. Like, people will say, oh, you're going to go into starvation mode and your body's going to burn muscle. And it's like, that's actually not true. Your body is not that stupid. If you store energy as body fat, it's because when you need it, your body will use body fat. Like, you'd have to think that we are designed pretty badly to store food as fat, and then when we need it, to burn protein. It doesn't even make any sense. Yeah. So that's sort of what we provide in our program, which is the IDM program, and that's that's something I think that a lot of people can benefit from.
Yes. And people have a doubt about the protocols. Intermittent fasting, 1 meal a day. What do you think about the protocols? It's a better protocol?
There is no real best protocol. So remember that fasting is any time that you don't eat. So to get into sort of the fasting, after a meal, it takes about, say, 3 to 4 hours before your insulin levels start to fall. So okay. When you eat, you eat, say, a dinner, your stomach holds a lot of the food, and it mixes it and grinds it, and there's acid and so on, but it releases it slowly to the small intestine. So your stomach holds the food, and every little while it just shoves a little bit of food into the intestine. So your body doesn't stop absorbing the nutrients sort of immediately after a meal because it's held in the stomach. So, but after about 3 or 4 hours, the stomach's empty, and then there's no food coming in, and that's the signal that you have to start getting your energy from your body stores. So anytime that you don't eat more than about, say, 3 or 4 hours past the meal, you're starting to get into the fasting mode. And after that, it can be any time. So remember, if you go back into the 60s and 70s, people were eating for about 10 to 12 hours and fasting for about 12 to 14 hours. No snacks, and people did really well. There's really very little obesity compared to what we have now. So you can do a daily fast of like 12 to 14 hours. That's what people did in the 60s. It wasn't great for weight loss, but it was pretty good to maintain it, because remember, there's that balance. 12 hours feeding, 12 hours fasting. You've maintained it fairly close. Now, if you want to lose weight, then you have to extend that. So you can extend that to, say, 16 hours, which is a very common thing called time-restricted eating. So you're fasting for 16 hours and eating for 8 hours. So you've compressed your eating window to, say, 8 hours. So for example, from 10 to 6, for example. So you might have 2 meals in that time. And people say, oh, should you eat 2 meals or 3 meals? That actually doesn't matter. Fasting only refers to the amount of time you're not eating. What you eat during that eating window is different. That's your diet. The fasting, it applies to the stuff outside that. So that's a very common thing, and some people do very well with that. The shorter schedule, so remember, baseline is about 12 to 14 hours. That's sort of what you should be doing every single day anyway. 16 hours, you're probably going to do that 6 days out of the week sort of thing, and then you can extend it. You can go to 20 hours, and then 24 hours is sort of a 1 meal a day sort of a schedule. Remember, if you're going to go from dinner to dinner, that's roughly 24 hours, a little less, but it can work very well. So some people call this a 1 meal a day strategy, and some people do very well. So again, if you're going to go to the 1 meal a day strategy, very often you don't do it quite as often as the, say, 16-8. So you might do it 3-4 times a week. And then you start to extend it from there. With our type 2 diabetic patients, we will often extend it to a 36-hour fast. And then after that, we typically go to multiple day fasts. And the reason is not anything other than it works better. That is, the hardest day when you're doing multiple day fast tends to be somewhere around 36 to 48 hours. That's the hardest point. After that, it gets easier because, interestingly enough, the hunger actually starts to go down as you go into the multiple day fast. So by the time you hit day 2, you're really hungry. By the time you hit day 5, that hunger has largely dissipated, but you're still getting all the benefits, because remember, every day that you're not eating, you're forcing your body to use up the stores of body fat. So you wouldn't want to go to 2 days, because that's the hardest point, and then quit. Why don't you just extend it, do 7 days? That way you get 5 days of sort of relatively easy fasting compared to the first 2 days, which are always the hardest. So that's why we often avoid the sort of 48-hour fast, somewhere around there, and go into the multiple day fast. Of course, when you're going into multiple days, then you're not going to do that all the time. You're going to do it maybe once a month, once every other month, or whenever you need it. So if you're gained a bit of weight, then you use a little bit longer fasting. The other thing to understand is, so there's no right method. Some people like the shorter fast. Other people like the longer fast. You got to try it, see what you like, and then also look at your results. So some people, after 1 meal a day, they'll plateau. And if you plateau, then you got to shake it up, because your body adapts very quickly to everything. So what you need to do is sort of change it up. So don't do it all the time. If you're going to go dinner to dinner, for example, well, maybe once in a while go lunch to lunch or breakfast to breakfast. Just change it up. You can also change up your duration of fasting. So you don't have to do 1 meal a day all the time. Once in a while, you can throw in a longer fast. Once a day, you can have a couple of meals instead. So just something to shake your body out of what it's used to. But those are the sort of potential strategies, but all of them can work well. And you got to realize that everybody responds differently. So you can put the same diet to 2 people, and it will work completely differently. So if you find that something is really, your body is just not losing weight on that strategy, there's no point continuing it. You might as well try something else. And if it's something you really hate, then don't do it, because that'll never work in the long term. If it's something that you find very easy, so some people find the long fast very easy, and some people find it very hard. Do what's easy for you and what works for you. But you have to try it. There's no right or wrong answers. You just got to get in there, talk to people, see how they're doing. It's the same with the diet too. So the thing about the fasting is it doesn't apply to the diet. It applies to just the time that you're not eating. You can change up the things in your diet as well to get better or worse. So and we recommend sort of low carbohydrate diets, cutting out the sugar, cutting out the starches. Ketogenic diets are very good too.
Yes. Which protocol do you use?
We typically start people with a 24-hour. So, there's 2 points. There's what you eat, and then the fasting, which is the amount of time that you're not eating. So that's the when to eat question. So in terms of what to eat, we generally put people on, we have some general recommendations. Cut the sugar out, cut out the refined foods. So that includes refined grains, so bread and all that sort of stuff if you're trying to lose weight. But also things like vegetable oils are not good. They're highly refined, highly processed. So stick to whole foods, because you got to remember, carbohydrates are not necessarily the enemy here, because there's lots of cultures who have traditionally ate a lot of carbohydrates and done fine. But what they don't eat a lot of is they don't eat a lot of sugar, and they don't eat all the time. So I think those are very important things. So the Chinese in the 1980s, 1990s, eating huge amounts of white rice and still very thin. So it's not like you can't eat carbohydrates and still be thin, but there's a lot of different factors in it. But in general, we would want to stick people as close as they can to sort of whole foods, unprocessed foods as much as you can. The other thing is then that's sort of what you eat when you're eating. Then we typically start people with 24 hours of fasting 3 times a week. If they're a bit older, we might go to a 16-hour protocol. With the type 2 diabetics, we'll usually start with a 36-hour 3 times a week, just because they're more severe and we want their body to burn off more sugar. And if we're really, really worried, then we may start people with sort of multiple day fast. So if you're on a high dose of insulin, then we monitor people closely, and we'll often recommend for severe diabetes, we often recommend people start with a 5 or 7 or even 14-day fast to really get rid of that sugar and get to where you're going. But that's a severe sort of disease. Like, we're doing it for a specific purpose of reducing that disease.
Okay. Do you used to do to practice fasting every day?
I am pretty used to it by now. So what I tend to do myself is I tend to do a lot of 24-hour fasts because they're easy for me. It fits into my schedule. So if you skip breakfast, mostly people don't notice. And if you skip lunch, then most people also don't notice. But if you skip dinner, and I have dinner with my family most nights, it's kind of awkward if everybody else is eating and I'm not eating. And they'll understand, of course, because I write about it all the time, but it's not really something that I want to do, and not necessarily anything I need to do either. So I do a lot of the 24-hour fast because it simply fits in very easily. The other thing is that I vary it. So on holidays, for example, I won't do it at all. And then after the holidays, I often do a longer fast because I can't stomach it as well. So then I know after a week of eating and stuff, it's like, and then I'll know that, okay, I'll do a longer fast and then it's fine. So just recently I went on vacation. So I ate mostly 3 meals a day, which I rarely do, but for about a week I did. Actually, the last 2 days I couldn't. I was just actually feeling too full. But then after that, I did a longer fast, and now my pants fit normally, so then that's fine. I go back to my usual schedule. The other thing that I do is that when I get very busy, I tend to skip lunch more because that gives me more time in the day to do writing or to see, to do my work or to catch up or to read or whatever I like to do. It gives me that time back that I don't have to do. And the breakfast is perfect for that because, one, I don't get hungry at breakfast anymore. And 2, it's much easier for me not to have to cook something, eat something, then clean up before I go to work. I would rather just get up and brush my teeth, take a shower, and walk out the door, as opposed to the extra half an hour that it would take to fry up some eggs or make some eggs. And that's where people get into trouble with breakfast. Not that there's anything wrong with breakfast, but it tends to be a meal that is very, very processed. So if you look, people want a slice of toast because you just take it out and stick it in the toaster with some jam. And then it's like, okay, but now you've got a lot of refined grains, sugar in the jam, sugar in the bread. It's highly processed, highly refined, and you're eating that every single day. Why not just use the body fat instead? It's so much easier. But if people like breakfast, then I have nothing against it. I actually think that eating breakfast actually works very well personally. When I eat a big breakfast, I actually feel very full for most of the day and then I eat very little at dinner time. And that actually works really well. The problem is that I don't have the time to do that all the time. So I will do it sometimes. But it's the same thing with snacks. There's nothing inherently wrong with snacks, but they tend to be highly processed, full of sugar, full of refined grains like crackers and cookies. And this is the thing I find very frustrating, is that if you look at children, they actually get snacks all the time. And it went from something that was sort of a treat, something that people would only take once in a while, to something that happens almost every single school day. And it's like now the kids are getting the message that you need to be eating 6 times a day because they've done it all through school. And hey, school must know because they're teachers and they're adults and so on. And now they're getting the message that, hey, you should eat all the time. Like you have breakfast at home, then you have a mid-morning snack, then you have lunch, you have an after-school snack, then you have dinner, and then you eat snacks between halves of a soccer game. And it's like, okay, now before you know it, it's 6 times a day that you're eating, and you think that's normal. It's like, that's not normal. That was never normal. It was only normal because we told people that. So it's bad, because we're teaching these kids that, and they're going to grow up and they're going to teach their kids that, and then everybody's going to wonder, hey, I wonder why we're so overweight. It's like, because you're eating all the time. But we've made it into such a virtuous thing that schools and stuff do. It's like, and it's not necessary. So again, having that knowledge and just saying, look, there's no such thing as a healthy snack. I mean, you don't need to snack. I mean, if you are hungry at dinner, then you should eat more at lunch. Like, that's what we used to tell people. If you're hungry at bedtime, you should eat more at dinner.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you go out and eat. Yes. But anyway, it's
And your family does fasting, your kids?
The kids don't. So mostly for the kids, I try to encourage them not to eat snacks, but they're not always successful, because again, it's completely different. By the time they get to school, you know, you get a lot of trouble for the kids if people say, oh, you didn't eat breakfast. I'm like, oh my God, it's like child abuse, right? And then so they give them a snack. So if the whole class is eating crackers, they're going to eat crackers. So I just try and tell them that, look, it's not something you have to do. You know, and it's interesting because my younger son, of course, still eats a lot of snacks and stuff. But my older son, who's a teenager now he's becoming more interested in his body. He wants to look good for the women, right?
Yeah.
And it's the opposite for the girls, I'm sure, want to look good for the guys. But now they're interested in making sure they don't gain weight and stuff. So now I can tell he's really cut down a lot of the refined foods. He's cut out breakfast because he's not that hungry. And he you know, I wake up like 20 minutes before walking out the door. He wakes up like 2 minutes before walking out the door. Yeah. Right? So he loves it because, hey, he can sleep in until the last minute and then just get up, brush his teeth, and walk out the door. So they do. For the children, I don't recommend them fasting, because not over 24 hours anyway. Mostly the important thing, because they're growing, so you have to make sure they get their nutrients, but making sure that you don't eat a lot of snacks. So eating 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day is okay. Once you're getting into the 6 meals a day, sort of, it's not good. So that's what I recommend for children, is mostly cutting out the snacks, eating whole foods, again, making sure that people understand the difference, and education, and that's the main thing.
So let's to the last question. What most extreme case of patient you have treated with fasting?
We've had so many patients who have such incredible stories. I mean, just last week, I saw a fellow who's on day 110 of fasting. So he hasn't eaten for 110 days. And incredibly, we've gotten his diabetes a lot better, but he's still on some medication. His sugar is still high. That's how much sugar was sort of stuck in his body. So it's incredible how much you can, like, how little you need. The human body is such an incredible thing. So anyway, he's feeling great, actually. He looks fantastic, feels fantastic. He's lost a lot of weight. His sugars have come down. He's still got a ways to go. So that's probably the most extreme length of fasting. We've had a lot of people do 30 days of fasting multiple times. You know, from a disease reversal standpoint, the most impressive thing is how quickly some people respond. So we have a case series that's being published in the medical scientific literature, and it's crazy because people have had type 2 diabetes for 30 plus years, and they will completely reverse. That is, will take them off all their medications, and their sugars are maintained in a normal range for 3 months, and the blood work show it would classify them as non-diabetic. It's like, wow, that's pretty incredible to have a completely free and accessible treatment, because it's not a treatment for the sort of 1%. It's not like just for rich people sort of thing. Yeah. This is a treatment that's really for everybody to stay healthy. And we will reverse their type 2 diabetes that they've had for 30 years in like 6 months or less. And we've had probably 10, 15, 20 patients who do that. It's incredible. And then it's something that they can maintain. That is, even if they sort of fall off and start to eat a lot of sugar and stuff again, you can still treat them. You can still make them better. It's not irreversible at that point. And that's what's so important, is that this is something that we have control over. So what we're trying to do is give people back the power to control their disease. That is, type 2 diabetes is a reversible disease, but the power to reverse it lies within the people themselves. It's not like you have to go to your doctor and say, okay, what do I need to do? This expensive medication or this expensive surgery, right? It's something that you do yourself, that you can control whether you have the disease or not, and make yourself better or make yourself worse, but at least you have the knowledge to do it and the tools to do it, because they're all right in front of you.
Yes. Okay, thank you, Jason. I will tell about your blog here in this video, about your program. Tell me a little more about your program, and just we can finish the video.
Sure. So it's www.idmprogram.com. So it stands for Intensive Dietary Management, and we have several different levels. So we have a lot of free information. So it's just available, the blog, and we have links to videos and on YouTube and so on. So there's a lot of free information out there, because if people have the information they need, that's all we want. We want them to have that, get themselves healthy. We have a membership community, which provides a little bit more. So because we have to, so you get like a weekly email, and there's videos, and there's a group fast that they do every month, and then there's other things we're adding to make it easier for people, including like we're trying to integrate some apps and so on into that, but that costs money, so we have to charge for that in order to be able to continue to provide that. It's $39 a month, so relatively affordable. And if you're fasting, I mean, honestly, that doesn't even get you lunch these days. $39 is just like the price of a lunch, and if you're not eating, you're going to get that back easily.
Yeah.
And then there's the sort of highest level, which is a small group sessions, where you actually have an individual counselor who's sort of experienced in training people. We have a Portuguese speaking lady as well, Dr. Nadia, who now lives in Portugal. She lived in Toronto, so we worked with her extensively. She actually specializes in PCOS, which is polycystic ovary syndrome, and specializes in getting people pregnant.
Oh, great.
But she's moved back to Portugal, so she's Portuguese speaking, and she provides the not individual, but sort of small group counseling. So she'll actually look, if you have specific questions like, oh, can I eat this? Can I eat this? Or can you look at my diet? And she'll be able to help you with that. And for that, you pay for a number of sessions. So 18 sessions, which we think is good enough for a year, is $1,000 US roughly. And then, of course, if you want to stretch it out over 2 years, you can, or whatever it is. But that's sort of the highest level. But that's because we have to provide, we have to provide the counselors. So we can't do that for free. But there's a lot of information. There's also links to the books, which, again, a lot of people will be able to just read the books and do it themselves. And then that's great. And that's, relatively inexpensive. Or just read the blogs and do fine. So any of those levels, we just want to be able to provide as much or as little as they need, but it's all there at idmprogram.com. Also in terms of the diet and in terms of the science as well. The blog is mostly about science, and it's all archived, so all the information, even all the information in the books, it's all in there. It's all over the last few years. It's all for free. It's just that the books are nicer because they've been edited and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Your book, The Obesity Code, is translated last year in Brazil, Código da Obesidade, the name in Portuguese, and people love it, the book in Portuguese, because we have a little books about the real science and fasting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that one's available, and hopefully some of the other ones will be available soon too. So I don't know. There is a Spanish version of the Complete Guide to Fasting, but I don't know if there's a Portuguese version yet.
No, not yet in Portuguese. So, Jason, I would thank you so much for this knowledge and about your work. Thank you, thank you. You changed my life.
So thank you so much. So
So
great to meet you.
long. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.